Frank Aigbogun is the publisher of BusinessDay Newspaper. He joins me now to expand the discussion on the new tax regime. Good to have you on the news. Talk to us about the reasoning behind the House of Representatives' decision to reject the proposed VAT increase and approve the tax reform bills.
Thank you. The committee didn't quite provide rationale for the decision to retain VAT at 7.5%. But I think when you talk to business people, what you hear is that the reforms of the government, starting from the petrol price reform in May of 2023, these reforms have brought significant pressure on individuals, reducing purchasing power, and even on businesses with rising inventory. So from the perspective of business leaders, I think it makes sense to allow VAT remain at 7.5% for a while, as individuals, Nigerians, and the businesses that they own transit from the pain of reform to recovery. That should be, in my view, a sacrifice that the government makes to help promote recovery, economic recovery in the country, and of course, a recovery of households' income in Nigeria. So I think retaining VAT at 7.5% at this time makes a lot of sense.
We understand the House of Representatives incorporated feedback from stakeholders during its public hearing. Can you talk to us about some of the key concerns stakeholders raised that they paid attention to?
Well, I made a point already about the pressure that Nigerians at home and businesses are already facing. I mean, if you look at it, reforms shouldn't just be about taxing the people. Reform should also be creating tools and incentives that help Nigerians and their businesses to prosper. It will be good for government to tax prosperity of Nigerians and prosperity of businesses. As have been said, doesn't make sense taxing poverty. I think that's a major plank for those who canvass the retention of VAT at the current rate of 7.5%. But there is also the point to be made that in looking at the whole effort at reforming taxation in Nigeria, that the government focuses on the big wins, those critical things that it wants to achieve, and does not allow fighting small fires, then lead to distraction from attaining the major goals, or if you like, the low-hanging fruits. But there will be, I believe, questions around other aspects of the House of Representatives Committee recommendations on the tax bill that is finding its way through the National Assembly.
The revised tax reform bills include changes to the sharing formula, that's the VAT sharing formula, allocating 30% based on consumption rather than company headquarters. How do you think this change will impact revenue allocation across different regions in Nigeria?
I think there are two aspects to that. Firstly is to look at the idea of dedicating only 30% to, if you like, derivation. I think the House Committee is just being smart by talking about consumption. VAT, when it comes to consumption, was never calculated on the basis of headquarters of government. It's on the basis of tax revenues from a particular region, from a particular state. So the real issue for me is about 30%. I think in proposing 30% for derivation or for consumption or at the place of consumption, the House of Representative Committee has, in my view, made a very serious blunder. We are at a point where we should be rewarding productivity. And in this particular case, productivity for me is where the revenue is generated. My preference would be to dedicate at least 50%, to consumption or to derivation, whichever one you call it. And then 30% to equality. I think it is wrong for the committee to suggest that whether or not you contribute VAT revenues, you would share from the 50%. Doesn't make sense to me. It's part of why the economy is where it is. We reward the wrong people.
All right.
We subsidize the wrong things. So how do you encourage states to increase VAT revenue generation in their states if all they get is 30%?
All right, let's take one more question before we let you go. The committee deleted the clause on the proposed introduction of inheritance tax, I beg your pardon, and made recommendations for operators of free trade zones. What do you think informed this?
Well, Nigeria is still a very traditional society. We are still steep in our culture. Inheritance is almost something that is sacred in Nigeria, in many communities or most communities in Nigeria. There is still that very significant pushback when government begins to interfere with what a father, a mother, or a parent has passed on to his or her children or to other people. I don't think Nigeria is ready to entertain significant intrusion of government into derivation. It makes a lot of sense. If you then inherit something and you decide to invest it, then it makes sense to charge the profit that you make. But it doesn't make sense to many people that at this time of development, the government is looking at taxing. I mean, it can't just be tax. There has to be some reasonableness in the way these tax items are introduced.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us. We appreciate your time.